This episode is brought to you by Audi. The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power, serious acceleration, and advanced Audi tech. It's not just a new EV, it's a new way to experience driving. The all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron is here. The next chapter of Audi starts now.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode, and I've got a fantastic guest for you today, James Childress. And today's business podcast is all about entrepreneurship. James is a profitability and growth advisor. He's got over 20 years of experience, and it's going to be a great conversation about entrepreneurship and data and building and growing and scaling a business. James, welcome.
So glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, you've got a lot of experience. So talk about your background as a CPA and what you do now. And I'm really excited to delve into the conversation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I've got a bit of a unique background as an accountant. Most accountants will tend to pick two major tracks when they go into public accounting. One is audit, one is tax, and they'll get in there and they'll just start digging deeper and deeper. I specialized to a certain extent through my career, but I also generalized extensively. So worked with a lot of small firms and worked with a lot of small to medium-sized business clients. And spent a lot of time actually as an auditor and actually working for a lot of companies or on my own. And in both cases, basically doing the work entirely by myself most of the time. And so I came up with a lot of tools to help me get their financials for my clients back on track real fast all year, and ended up helping them a lot with all of the detailed things that their accounting system need, doing a lot of work at that managerial and owner level to help these clients have the accounting system they needed, and answering questions all the time. And so as time went on, we really just leaned into, I and the people in my group, my firm, we leaned into that particular work where we were helping owners, helping managers, helping them understand the most important data in their business, which is their accounting. And so that's really what we do. We help our clients understand data, financial, non-financial. We help them navigate the path of entrepreneurship in a safe, stable, and secure way. And yeah, I'd love to talk further on it.
Yeah, I love that. And I've always loved history and just hearing just how far we progressed. And one of those is W. Edwards Deming. And so a lot of people are like, yeah, we live in technology. We've got AI. How can Deming help a modern business owner?
Yeah, it's probably good to elaborate a little bit on who Deming was. William Edwards Deming is the person they credit with what they call the Japanese economic miracle. And so this is where the country of Japan, that was reduced to a very low state after World War II. They didn't even have working phones. And Deming was actually laughed out of American boardrooms. They didn't really like his ideas. And he got sent over to Japan basically to conduct a census and figure out how many people were on the island, because they didn't even know how many people they needed to support, where they were, all those types of things. Over the course of 20, 30 years, Deming's principles in business became essential to Japan rebuilding, and not only rebuilding, but in that period of time becoming the third largest world economic superpower. And that's why they call it the Japanese economic miracle, because it really was unprecedented, and we almost have never seen anything like that since. And so when we think about a lot of the modern gurus in business, like Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, a lot of these people that are very well known, Warren Buffett, Deming was their giant and their idol, essentially. And so one of the big lessons that Deming taught us and that he used is, he said it this way, and I quote him often, but I'll probably get it right. He said, 85% of the time, the reasons for failure are due to deficiencies in the systems and processes. And we should fix the systems and processes of the organization rather than badger the employee to do better. Now, this is where modern business owners really need to understand, especially as we see emerging new systems, emerging software that they're going to integrate into their business. They really need to understand that they have to acknowledge, as the owner, as the entrepreneur, they have to acknowledge their part to play is in the integrating of everything. And so what Deming was trying to avoid was a philosophy of scapegoating, which is, it's very common as you're an entrepreneur, you go through these challenging situations, maybe money's tight, the timeline's tight, all these things as your business grows are challenging. It can be very easy to just play whack-a-mole with problems and assign blame. And Deming was very much an advocate of saying, take the time to figure out exactly what's going on, exactly what's missing between the components, and learn really from that. And if that is really the lesson, it's really the timeless lesson that caused the Japanese economic miracle to take place under his leadership, and that modern entrepreneurs and business owners can still use to great effect.
Yeah, I love that. And you were referencing how the greats like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, they had mentors, and how our generation, we look at Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. So it's very interesting. And it's really interesting how you're incorporating timeless principles in our new age of innovation. The other thing that Deming said is mostly your fault, and that's good news. So talk about that.
Yeah. So what he's basically saying there is 85% of the problems relate to the systems and processes. And what he was saying, that each sort of node in the business has to be connected in a way where it can be successful. Another thing that Deming said, and he was a believer in this, he was a pretty compassionate leader, but he said no one goes to work to do a bad job. And what he was trying to emphasize with that was that if someone is doing a bad job, it's typically not their goal. It's typically not what they want to accomplish. And so something is in the way. Something is in the way of them doing a good job. It may very well be the handoff between them and another system. It may very well be the supervision that they have, the managerial structure that's there. It may very well be you're holding that person responsible for things they don't have autonomy for. And that is one of the biggest issues we see in organizations. But it's very easy as an entrepreneur to want to assign, blame to a certain aspect. Blame is a charged word, but you want to localize the problem. You got to put out a fire, and you got to do it now. It really makes sense, and logically, or maybe more so emotionally, just as knee-jerk reaction. But what Deming said was, don't lose sight of the fact that each part of your organization wants to work together, whether it's the software or whatever. You have to make sure they do. And sometimes that means you have to think of a novel connection, a novel process that bridges the gap, and something that's in the way there. And that really is your job. That's your job as the entrepreneur. And what's great about that is you can look at that and you can say, okay, if I can believe that this person actually wants to do good work, they want to get through the end of the day and be proud of what they accomplished, all I need to do is find the right way to link up what they actually are responsible for with what the output needs to be somewhere else in the business. And if you can do that and do it in a way that's skillful and nuanced and doesn't ignore all the things that come into play, you have made a change to your systems and your processes that may very well last forever. And the ideal state is when it self-nurtures and it grows itself. You create a culture around that idea of fixing all these little connections, and then it starts to really take off on its own. And that's the magic of entrepreneurship.
Yeah. You're talking about all these systems, and coming from the corporate world, and there's all this idea of scapegoating. And why does scapegoating kill business success? And it's one of the most common mistakes a entrepreneur can make. And why is that?
Yeah, so scapegoating is basically the process of assigning blame to something that it isn't appropriate for it to receive. And again, there's a difference between putting the fire out and preventing the fire. And whenever we see an issue in our business, whatever it might be, we want to be very clear on what is this area that we see, what is it actually responsible for. And so an example of that would be, let's say we were back in the time that Deming was doing work with the Japanese and they had assembly lines and all these types of things. Imagine you're at the end of the assembly line and something is starting to stack up. So there's a backlog that's getting created in a certain area of the assembly line. You could look at that particular area where that particular process is being done, and you could say these people aren't doing the work, or these tools aren't working, or this consultant we brought in to fix this process right here isn't working. When in fact, it may very well be that the timing of things preceding that step are out of whack. And it might mean that there's an entirely different area that sort of precedes this issue here that's actually causing that. And so if you fall into the trap of scapegoating, you're going to look at the area around the specific problem rather than, as Deming said, looking to the system as a whole. And that's really where you want to be. And that's a state that requires a little bit of patience, maybe a little bit more information than you might currently have on hand. So it might take even a little bit more time. But if you really work that out, you get to the root causes, because it's never just one. You get to the actual root causes of what's going on. You can start iteratively fixing these pieces and start tuning this thing up and getting it in track where you want to go. So that's really what I think he was meaning by that.
Yeah. Why do plans, they don't matter, but planning is everything?
Yeah. So this is something they say in the military. My dad was in the Air Force, so I grew up around a lot of kind of pithy sayings and stuff like that. But one of the things they say in the military is that plans are disposable, but planning is indispensable. And the idea, when we think about the other saying that kind of corresponds to this that helps, is they also say no plan ever survives first contact with the enemy. So you have to have a plan, and the planning process itself is actually so much more valuable than that particular plan, because it has a shelf life, and it can be relatively short sometimes. Once you start getting into something, it may not look like what you thought it would be, and there's going to be some surprises. And once you start to interact with the outside world, with customers and vendors, and start bringing on employees and whatever it might be, your plan might no longer work. But if you didn't have a plan to start with, you're going to be way out in left field. So we really advocate for entrepreneurs and owners that they do iterative planning, regular planning, and they don't treat a plan like something that they always have to find some way to get back to that original plan, because it might no longer be relevant. And they have to be really open to not getting numb to their plan or their budget, where it no longer guides them anymore. And it's just this sideline. So that's really the idea there. Planning is indispensable, but plans may very well be disposable. So sometimes you just got to go back to the drawing board and create a new plan. And that's okay.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. 2008, the great financial crisis taught me, like, plan for worst case scenarios, like the black swans. And then, and then COVID taught me think about alternative things. So you have worst case scenario, but then you have a dichotomy of things, possibilities, so that you're always, what you're talking about, open, and you're not just stuck on one, single thing. And so I really love that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. COVID was a time where a lot of people saw, hey, there's opportunities here. And they really were. And some of the opportunities that people took advantage of saved lives. So making money and saving lives is not a bad approach, but you can always see those opportunities if you're open to it and not locked in mentally and emotionally to old ideas that no longer relevant. But you can see very clearly a lot of plans got thrown to the wayside in a very big way during COVID. But even now you can see some plans they're just no longer relevant, and it's okay to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah. Talk about data-based decision-making and how it can be catalyst for your businesses.
Yeah, Deming talks about data and using the data. One of his quotes, and I love this chance to talk about him. So I'm glad you're interested in all the things he said. But another thing that Deming said, which I really like, we use this with the owners we work with, is he said, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. It's a relatively scathing remark, but there's a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs who kind of run things based on hunches, who kind of run things based on gut feelings, and they go with their gut. And that's an MO for a lot of people. Deming really did not like that idea. He really liked getting as much data to solve a problem as possible. Now, in the modern world, we have incredible opportunities to gather data, and in some ways we can be pretty novel about it. So keep in mind, when we think about data, sometimes we think about statistics and spreadsheets and things like that. It doesn't have to be so dry as that. One thing that people do for personal self-reflection is they keep a journal at the end of the day, right? And just maybe write down a few remarks, a few sentences about how the day went. That's an incredible source of data, right? Because you can look back and you can see trends about how you felt and experiences you had, right? So data doesn't necessarily have to be this dry thing. It's basically just a record that's organized. It could be databases and tables and things like that, and visual reports and all those types of things, but something that's relatively authoritative, at least shows some trends that you can look back on and gather some information from. So whatever you're doing in your organization, wherever you see a problem, sometimes you can send out some surveys to people who are throughout the organization and ask for their input. Sometimes you can have team meetings and make a list of what everybody thinks, have them write it out on a list separately and then compare notes. And then you can be like, okay, 5 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 people think this is the issue. Now we can investigate. And it's a little bit different than having a discussion about it. You're just collecting everybody's thoughts instead in a very proactive way where they're not influencing each other's admission to the group, contribution to the group. So be savvy about it, but collect data to corroborate your decisions. And especially if you have a hunch, you might be right, and the data might even disagree. That doesn't mean you just casually abandon the hunch and go for the data, or the data and go for the hunch. That means you've got a great opportunity to clarify what's different here and why. Dig into it. There's this sort of sense of entrepreneurship as being this thing where you're frantically flying by the seat of your pants. And Deming really he was an advocate for you really have to take your time. You really have to think things through, and you have to gather as much information as possible when you're making decisions. And so I think that's what he was intending there. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. How can people check out your work and your website and follow you and reach out to you?
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. You can come to our website at CAC Advisors with an O, cacadvisors.com. We also have a channel on YouTube where we share some ideas about forecasting and business and entrepreneurship. We'd love to see you there. Feel free to reach out to us with anything you might need.
Yeah. And for all the audience, let's thank for a wonderful podcast episode. And thank James. Be sure to give his socials a like and follow and reach out to him. And thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Dr. Lou. Appreciate it so much.